This is the ABQ Business Podcast with your host, Jason Rigby. Each week we'll interview visionary business leaders to inspire the creative power and spirit that's in every entrepreneur. Discussing strengths, weaknesses, strategies, systems, and the problems we can all solve together for a new future for local small business.
What is up, peeps? Welcome to the ABQ Business Podcast. This is your host, Jason Rigby. Super excited today. Have a guest that I think we're going to just have a wonderful show. It seems like we almost have like the same type of mindset. A lot of that may have to do with both of us were in the Marine Corps. But it is Donnie. And Donnie, what did you say about when you were in the Marine Corps boot camp, how they pronounced your last name?
Well, when you grew up with a last name like I got, you just waited for the teacher to say Donnie and then something that began with B. But I got the last name Bovine, but everybody looks at it and thinks it says bovine. So imagine going through Marine Corps boot camp where everybody, thought you were a fucking cow the entire time.
Oh, that was funny. I had to have you put that one on there. Yeah. I take this certain vitamin or something, and it has the bovine or something.
Nice. So
yeah. So every time I take it, I'll remember you.
I appreciate that. That makes me feel a lot better about my path in life. I've inspired you to think about me every time you think of the word cow.
Maybe you should open up a supplement company.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it could be a play on words. Yeah, it would be. I know they're doing all that liver pills and nose to tail and meat eaters only and all that stuff. So
yeah,
that would be awesome.
There's a buddy of mine runs a company called Bub's Naturals, and he does I forget, but it's basically ground up bovine cowhide. And you put it in your coffee and stuff, and it's brilliant for joints and everything else. And his Bubs actually comes from was the call sign of one of the guys that was killed in Benghazi, which was his best friend growing up. So Bubs Naturals all kind of dedicated in that guy's memory. So really cool product, but it's made from ground up cowhide.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think it's something like that I take. It's supposed to be for joints and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm 47, so.
Well, if you were in the Marine Corps, things just ache and break and hurt.
Yeah, whenever I kind of knew something was wrong. Whenever I was we were going to Somalia, and I was standing there, and they just kept pumping us full of all this medicine.
Right.
Shot form. There was like 40 of them.
Don't ask questions, just shut up and take it.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, one out of 40's got to kind of fuck you up for the rest of your life.
Right. Thank you for that gift.
I want to get in. Yes, I want to get into you a little bit and get into your story. You have Success Champions Network that you started due to COVID, and we'll get into that. You're award-winning professional sales trainer, top 200 iTunes podcaster, Marine Corps veteran, and not only that, you have a podcast. And I love the name because you use the word badassery. Where did you come up with that name? Just by generally just being a badass?
I don't ever really truly profess that I'm myself a badass, but I do like it when others say it. So, we came up with the Success Champions as a whole because I believe everybody should, be the champion of their own success. And I often found that most people just kind of went through life and never championed themselves, what they were doing, what they were into, how they were succeeding and everything. And then I watched the movie Troy. Have you ever seen that movie?
Oh, yes.
Dude, Brad Pitt. And it's one of the most brilliant opening scenes of all time. So for those who may not have seen it, beginning scene, you got these two massive armies coming together. And this is back in, the day of the Spartans and stuff, so medieval as hell. And the two kings come together, and they've got thousands upon thousands of guys behind them. And they're like, look, we can duke it out right now. Your army against my army. We kill thousands of men, or you bring your best. I'll bring my best. We'll let them duke it out in the middle. See what the hell turns up. And if my guy wins, we win. We take your army. You win. You take my army. They both agree. And of course, the one king comes out and he brings out this giant of a man. I mean, that dude had so many muscles that he had muscles where there shouldn't even be muscles.
Mhm.
And then, of course, they go find Brad Pitt, and he's drunk and passed out in a brothel. They're like, dude, you got to get up and fight. So he comes stumbling out. The king realizes that Brad's, drunk as hell. And he goes, just go win this thing already. And the other giant of a man is like screaming and hollering and, I got this. I'm going to kill you. And of course, we've seen the movie. Brad comes out, runs up, one quick move, stabs the guy in the neck. Guy dies, fight scene over. His army wins. And I always thought about that particular scene because for me, as I went along my journey, all too often I was championing others, which is a beautiful thing. There's nothing wrong with that. But I wasn't actually stepping out front and being my own champion. So when I launched the company in 2017, that's what I said I was going to do, was teach others how to be the champion of their life, how to be the champion of their success. And so Success Champion was born.
So, why do you think it is that people put, basically others first? And I know moms are really good at this. They'll put, they'll put their children before and then they won't take care of themselves, mentally, physically, spiritually. Why do people do that?
Well, it's really an interesting thing. And from what I've found, and this was my own truth, is I think somewhere along the way, we quit loving ourselves. We quit, actively respecting ourselves, and we become the result of what others feel and say about us. And so the mothers taking care of their kids, that is a truly beautiful thing, but it's not always healthy. Because at some point, if you don't look back and go, damn, I'm a good person too, then
Mhm.
you're giving all that self-love away, and it's going to kick your ass down the road. And you're going to get to a point in your life, you're like, what the fuck am I living for? And that was kind of my journey is, I spent my entire ride, making other people wealthy, living other people's dreams, and, got to a point of life where I had no idea what I was going to do, where I was heading, what was going to turn up, and, and freaking the hell out of what the rest of my life was going to have. And I think for a lot of people, as they're moving through the journey, because they've only focused on others, they've never truly met themselves, and therefore they don't know how to be their own champion.
No, I love that. Like what you just said, like they've never met themselves. Like they've never had, and I'm not talking, having some crazy conversation with yourself and just talking to yourself all the time, but a lot of people are afraid. Why do you think that is? Why are people so afraid to meet themselves?
I think they don't think I think they would not like, I can't get my words out, would not like who they met if they actually tried to meet themselves. I'm sure we're going to talk about how I got into business and everything else, but for most of my journey, I thought I knew who I was. And I think that it took me damn near losing everything that I had before I finally had to take pause and start figuring out what makes me tick. But, people spend their entire lives trying to impress others so they can hear the right words. And so they're trying to live up to somebody else's standards because they just, frankly, they give a shit more about what other people think about them than what they think about themselves. So if somebody else says I'm good, if somebody else says I'm awesome, then it must be true. So instead of living for themselves, they're living for some sort of approval by other people. It's literally like they're walking around with a whiteboard on their chest, asking people to walk up and write their worth on that whiteboard. Please, sir, please tell me how much I'm worth. And versus just realizing that they're a damn good fucking person. They just got to turn off the noise of the world and just show up for themselves.
I love that. Yeah, that whiteboard analogy is so true. So let's put that filter on your life, and I want everybody, because this is, I think, will be a great practice for everyone. If we put the filter of just trying to please others all the time and walking around with this whiteboard on, and let's start from when you first noticed this with yourself. Was it before you were in the Marine Corps? Was it when you were in high school? When did this begin? This journey of you trying to understand success, trying to understand. Did you always have kind of an entrepreneurial
No,
mindset?
God, no. I've never was that kid that had the, 5 lemonade stands and, been selling shit since I was 19. Nah, dude, I was a follower. Um, I was always the kid that just did a lot of the times what other people did. But, I grew up on a 500-acre farm in Kansas up until about the age of 11 before I moved to Texas. And so we went from a small town, one stoplight, town where graduating class was like 22 students in kindergarten through 12th grade was all in one building, to now Texas. And the transition of going to my class size of a whole was like 40 students to sitting in classes of 40 students, not including, my entire class,
Right.
um, and so I had the hand-me-down clothes from my brothers, and we're living with family because we weren't poor. We just didn't have any money. There's a big difference, I think. And so there was this incessant need to try and fit in. So to do that, like you do in corporate America, you kind of shut up and fall in line, and you just do what others do. So I went through most of my journey with a chip on my shoulder. I did a lot of stupid shit, a lot of fighting and stuff in school, but and that was just because I didn't fit in anywhere. And then everything from my life moving forward was always this series of doing what was in front of me versus trying to figure out what I really wanted to do. So my oldest brother had gone in the Marine Corps, so I went in the Marine Corps. I was already heading down to a really kind of a shitty path, doing a lot of stupid things, and who knows where the hell I would have ended up. But my family thinks I would have ended up in prison or jail, but I don't know if it had gotten that bad. But you know, to getting out of the Marine Corps, taking a job with my best friend because it was there. I went up to St. Louis and worked up there because that was just the next job in front of me. I then came back home bartending because all my friends from high school and stuff were bartending. Every stage of my life was just something in front of me. I never, until I turned 40, I never looked at life and said, that's what I should be doing. Let's go do that. Let's go learn something. Let's go try some. And so it was most of, I think, my greatest learning has become from a reflective in nature, is looking back over the years now, knowing where I am and what I've learned in 3 short years of running my business, and looking at the experiences and go, that's why I went through that. It's been a really unique and fun ride. And I love telling people, it took launching a business for me to finally meet me, which was a crazy ass journey.
Yeah, and whenever you say, like I should be doing this or I should be doing that, like, and then it was just right in front of you, and so you saw this person do it. I mean, that's quintessence a follower.
Yeah.
Like you had said earlier, with the should be, was there like, were you guilty? Did you have a lot of fear? Was there worry? I know for me, I've noticed this in my own life. And it wasn't like you said until I had gotten 40, was that, I always feel like I'm unworthy and that I have to prove myself all the time. And so I take everything extremely personal. And now I recognize this, and I have, affirmations and mantras and stuff, so I can recognize it right when it happens. And then looking at and say, well, I'm getting pissed off because I'm feeling like this person thinks I'm not competent. I'm starting to feel unworthy again. Was this like should be doing? Was there this underlying like guilt, or what do you think motivated?
I love that the fact that the word victim has been so commercialized, because I think that explains a lot of my story. I always had that thought process. If people only knew how awesome I was, right? If people only knew, which is such a victim mindset throughout life, is if people only knew how hard I've worked. Well, fuck you. Everybody works hard. Right, to some extent, So there was always this I don't know, kind of underlying thing of fuck, I'm good enough. I can do this, right? Why can't people? And I wrote in my book, which is funny about my boot camp experience, because I can remember the day. It was training day 17 in Marine Corps boot camp. And I'm sitting there laying in my top rack, and I'm like, why in the hell do I have to go through this jackass yelling at me, screaming at me, telling me when to take a piss, telling me when to run, telling me when to eat? Why can't they just make me a Marine? Why do I have to go through all that? And I look back and I'm like, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard anybody come, say. But that's where I was. I was at this stage of I wanted to throw in the towel. I wanted to quit. I wanted to say the hell with it. And I got hurt twice in boot camp. So I spent almost 6 months in boot camp.
Mm.
And had to deal with drill instructors telling me that I was not going to graduate, not going to get out of it, blah, blah, blah. But I remember the day I graduated and the lieutenant colonel comes out and goes, hey, you're now a United States Marine. I, of course, and hoopla with everybody else. But the next thing I did, it was kind of the first thought that I had was, fuck, that was easy. And it
Mm.
was a wild experience for me to think about, is because I can remember the pain of training day 17. I can remember sitting in medical rehabilitation platoon. I can remember sitting in some of those tough moments. But then to graduate and really going in now onto the shitty side of the Marine Corps, but to graduate and then go forward, to look back on all of that timing and realize that that's the embrace the suck. That's the the shit you got to go through to become who you need to become. And it was wild that I could be in such a victim mindset and then get on the back of it and go, that was simple. And I've used that a lot in life, because if you've run a business, God knows you're gonna screw a lot of shit up.
Mhm.
And it's that quick reminder of, man, it only sucks right now. Eventually, you're going to come back to this moment and go, damn, that's why I went through this. But I think that's what most people are doing in life, is they're playing this victim game of, oh, woe is me. And they just haven't been honest with themselves to say, hey, I need to quit looking at why aren't people looking at me, and go, fuck, dude, you've done a lot. You've accomplished a lot of cool things. You've done some really good stuff. Now let's use that shit, right? Let's make something of yourself, and let's quit looking at what the world thinks of you and start realizing you're a pretty damn good person. Let's start there and see what we can build.
I love that. And you said when you're reflective in nature, and I know there's a lot of people, and then like afterwards you were like, oh, that was easy. I never, because I always like understanding different people. Never once did I say that was easy when I got out of Marine Corps boot camp. So I mean, it was just different
Right.
personalities. I was like, that's probably one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. Mentally, it was just excruciating for me, but whenever you think reflective in nature, and you said you've always done this, I think this is a great practice for some people. Are you extroverted, introverted, or?
Um, I'm a combination of both. So I spent 20 years as a straight commission sales guy, so I was extroverted as hell. Now that I've
Right.
run my business and I can do it all sitting right here on my farm, I've really become more introverted in nature. I just don't like peopling as much as I used to.
Yeah, I'm the same way. It's kind of it's funny. It's more peaceful for me, and I feel happier when I'm not constantly, in. I have to have, like you had said earlier, me time.
Yeah.
Just being in front of people all the time, constantly, it drains me. So when you said this reflective in nature, so that's something you've always done, is kind of when you go through something that sucks, you kind of look back and say, now, do you learn from it, or do you have like steps of how you don't repeat it, or what is this reflective system that you have?
I really only think that it came truly in play once I started, running my own business, so it was mind opening because as I launched the business, I really got to this spot where we literally almost lost everything that we had. And um, it was at that moment when I'm looking on the back porch of my farm and looking at my wife going, babe, we're going to lose everything, that I had the craziest epiphany of my life. And it was simply, there's no one else left to blame, right?
That's so good. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no excuses that you can use. You got yourself here. and only you are going to get yourself out of here. So it was the ability then to start moving, start selling, start growing. And it was through those series of, and J.K. Rowling says it best, rock bottom's the foundation of which I built my life. And I think that was for me that moment. And I think a lot of guys and gals like me that have always just kind of gone through the motions of life have got to take a massive scare the shit out of yourself risk, do something that's so asininely insane. Like for me, walking away from almost a 7-figure income and all the benefits of that and everything else to launching my own business. I think you've got to do something so damn crazy so you can break through your own bullshit that you've been living your entire life and actively, start moving forward. And it's in that realization that you get out of life what you put in, which I know is a statement that's been said 20 billion times by every freaking guru under the sun. But once you start realizing that who you've been up to this point in life has gotten you exactly where you are. Now it's time to level that person up so you can start going after life. And there's a lot of things to it. I mean, there's building processes and systems and duplicatable things, but it's also, changing your circles and the people that are influencing you, the people that you're around, and actually trying to become somebody in life versus just being a cog that's moving through it, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. I want to go back, and I mean, you had said you were making almost 7 figures. You're in this business. Obviously, you were working for someone else. Why weren't you happy, or what in your mind was happening to you to cause you to want to start your own business? If we could kind of
Yeah.
go, we'll get into your business, but I want to go like a little
Totally,
bit.
totally. No, that's great. So here's the thing is for the last almost 7.5 years before I launched my business, I worked for an organization called Sandler Training. And it's one of the largest sales training companies in the world. And I'd gotten really good at it. And I'd worked my way up to partner of our particular franchise and was going through the process of setting everything up so I could buy my business partner out. It was going to be a multiple 7-figure deal over 5 years. And at that point, that was everything. That's what I was going to be. That was going to be my life. I was going to be, continue to be one of the greatest sales trainers in the world. And I was going to continue to teach some of the biggest companies in the world. And I thought at that moment of my life, I had finally made it. We had our dream farm. I'd built a second home on the property for my mother-in-law. We had all of our animals. I had a great career, benefits, retirement plans. And we really, from the outside in, my wife and I had this beautiful life. And my business partner and I had gone out to dinner. And we were really at the beginning stages of negotiating what this buyout was going to be looking like. And so we had agreed we're going to go out and kind of celebrate all his past successes and hammer all the details out. And as we're out to that dinner, we're having a great time. Of course, we're having cocktails. And my then business partner looked at me and he just said a phrase that was such a gut punch that it literally changed everything that happened to my life past that moment. And I'd never had anybody hit me so strong with a phrase that changed everything. And what he said to me was, Donnie, thank God you're my retirement plan. And when he said it, dude, he said it out of love. I mean, he truly, truly did. And in my immediate response was, dude, it's been my honor. And I did. I still love the guy. I loved working with him. I loved helping him build his business. I loved how much he mentored me and all the growth I got underneath him. And it was a real and genuine moment to realize what him and I had built together. But then I walked to my truck. And as I sat down in my truck, I can remember sitting there. I was about a minute in the truck and I went, dude, what the fuck are you doing? You are literally somebody else's retirement plan. And it was this weird reflective moment where I went looking back on the rest of my life. And that's when I started having the realization, from boot camp to all the careers, the jobs, the sales, the successes, all the things I did were to fulfill somebody else's dream and not my own. And I started asking myself, dude, what the hell are you? What's your dream? What are you going to be when you grow up? And I was blank. I had no fucking answer. I really had no idea who I was supposed to be, how I was supposed to do it, what would my next moves be? And it was a really, really odd place where I was completely lost. And then I realized that I'd never bet on me. I'd never taken a risk big enough. So it was right then and there that I realized I'm about to start a freaking business. I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. I have no idea what it's going to look like, but that's what I'm going to do. So 40 years old, 15 days after that conversation with my business partner, I walked away from it all. I had no income coming in. I barely had a business name, and I called it Success Champions immediately. And I set off to be one of the next great motivational, inspirational speakers. And that's what set me on this wild ass journey of, you have no idea how to be a business owner. What the fuck are you doing? Who do you think you are? And a really rough series of trying to build a business, all while having no idea what I was really doing was meeting me for the first time. Roller coaster from crazy hell.
I could imagine. Yeah, that's to be able to walk away from that security that you knew that you had laid there. I mean, here you are 40 years old, and now you're going into something with that takes a lot of balls. I don't think there's a lot of people that could look at themselves and say, okay, we're going to go from this and all this success to zero, and we're going to start all over again. Now, I mean, I know you had that realization in the truck, and him talking about that his retirement plan, and then you begin to bet on you. And I love that statement. You begin to bet on you. What were kind of some of the first things that you begin to do as you were building your business where you're betting on you? And I know they can be failures too, if you want to do that.
The interesting thing is, in my hometown in Fort Worth, Texas, a lot of people knew who I was. I'd done a ton of networking over the years. I'd sat on a lot of boards, and I really had a pretty cool Rolodex. For you youngsters listening, that's an old thing that used to put names and numbers in. But it was a very, very, very cool place to be. Interestingly enough, nobody outside of Fort Worth, Texas knew who the hell I was. I had some friends in St. Louis and whatnot, but across the world, nobody knew who Donnie Bovine was. So I had to set off and do what I had done locally in Fort Worth across the world. And I wasn't prepared for how monumental of a task that was really going to be. And I really kind of had this thought process to me that, let's set up a website. Let's, get the business figured out and set up. And the clients will come rolling in. The opportunities will just present themselves, and shit's just going to happen. And I really had this rose-colored glasses kind of idea to what success in business was going to be like. And dude, it was such a punch in the face. And I had some early success because I realized I wasn't going to get on the stages quick enough to, and I'm still cocky enough to think that I can, hold my own to the Gary V's of the world, the Grant Cardones of the world, the Tony Robbins and all those guys. And it's the problem was, at that point, is all it was cocky. I didn't have the skins on the wall. I didn't have the successes. I didn't have the things that they had busted their ass over the years to build and do to warrant being on those stages.
Yes.
Right. So, I don't listen to a whole lot of Gary Vee, but I one thing that I love that he said is, man, it's taken me 10 years to get here, guys. You know?
Yeah, it's almost like when you are in Marine Corps and you're like laying in that
Yeah.
bunk and you're why can't they just make me a Marine?
Yep.
You know, it's that same mentality, you know, saying, "Oh, okay, well, why am I not on these stages?" So, was that kind of the whole motivation with your company? Was it to be, you know, just like a brand yourself and be a motivational speaker?
Originally, and something you said just made me think about it. It was kind of this moment of going through this that I realized that you have to go through it to become it.
Yes.
Right. And I think that was really forming in my head in these early stages. But yeah, to answer your question, I really thought this an influencer wasn't really a word that I'd known at that point. And I still don't think I'm an influencer. I think I'm just a guy who puts out a lot of freaking content on a regular basis. But, um, you know, I cared more about being a fucking household name than actually changing, inspiring lives. It was a lot of this cocky conceitedness in the beginning of this.
Hmm.
So I had to get humbled. I mean, that's the only way to it. Is I had to get knocked down a few notches, get this chip off my shoulder to realize that, dude, this is a fight. This is gonna be fucking tough, and you better freaking really lace your fucking boots up because you're about to get to work and really get after it. And I got to tell you, I've got so much more respect for, the people that I listen to, on the tapes and the books and everything over the years, because I finally understood how much fucking work these people actually put in to make all of that happen. And a lot of the success my company's found now is a lot of it's duplicating what those guys and gals have done, is actually putting in the time, the work, the energy, the effort to be able to build Success Champions to what it is now. And I still go back to, it's that work, it's the turning off what other people think, it's the tenacity to do the shit that nobody else wants to do, it's the consistency in posting content and conversations and everything else that forces you to almost erase a comfort zone altogether and start enjoying the journey of and building through there.
I love that. What you know, like when you're sitting on that, or you're standing on the back porch looking over your farm and you're looking at your wife and you're saying, we're gonna lose everything. What led up to that moment? What was happening, you know, I mean, with the business and with you personally to lead to that point? And then there was this huge realization.
Yeah, so brilliant question too. Um, what I'd come, so I was right about the 6 month mark in my business, and what I had not done was successfully build a business. I had built a job for myself. So
Mm,
I was under this massive non-compete with Sandler Training. So I couldn't do anything sales training, which was, sales is my world, it's what I knew. So I had to do this weird combination, and I don't know. I called it success coaching because I couldn't figure out what else to call it. And I was it was really wild, man. I was doing these different series, odd jobs, anything I could to bring revenue into the company. I mean, at one point I was building websites and videos and, anything I could do to try and find a buck. And what I realized at the 6 month mark is I didn't actually have a business. I mean, there was no logic to anything I was doing. I was just scrambling, trying to put shit together. And as I tried to figure out what this was going to be, because once again, nobody was giving me the stage because I was nobody. So the biggest realization was at that moment is I've got to figure out what the business actually is. What do we sell? What do we get other people? And, you know, there was a series of screw ups and mistakes as we continue to figure it out. And it really wasn't till April of 2018 that I started to get an idea of what the business could be. Now, mind you, I launched in September, the year before, and all the way up to this time, it was nickel and diming any job I could find to try and, turn this into a business. But a couple of things happened in April of 2018. One, a mentor of mine sat me down and asked me to explain my business to him, and I couldn't. And him telling me until I got a tangible product or service that I was destined to fail badly and was going to have to go back to work for somebody else. The second thing is I was starting to get burned down on this whole idea of being a business owner. And I had two things that were kind of pushing me along. One, the fear of everybody else seeing how bad I was doing and that I actually failed motivated me more. Because once again, I gave a shit about what people thought. So the thought that anybody would think that I'm a failure was pushing me harder than anything else. But it wasn't just me that I was having to support. It was my wife. It was my mother-in-law who still lives on the farm. And, there was more people than just me. I had to figure this out. So in April of 2018, I gave a speech, I don't know, to about a room of about 400 people. And I remember looking at my wife before I go give the speech. And I said, babe, here's the deal. Because this shit ain't working. I'm going to go give this speech. And if something turns up, we'll keep doing it. If nothing happens after the speech, I'll throw in the towel, right? I've given it a long damn go, and which I now look back and realize I was just getting started. I haven't even really gave it a go yet. Patience is one of the biggest bitches you got to learn being a business owner.
Yes.
But I really kind of put it all on the table and said, this is going to work or it's not. And I gave the speech and I went out Bruce Springsteen style and was screaming and running across the stage, acting a fool, lighting people up. And, I literally walked off that stage and I'm just exhausted. But you're the guy or gal on stage, people want to talk to you afterwards. So people started coming up to me and asking me questions, and I'm totally just drained and kind of going through the motions. And this guy walked up to me and he goes, dude, I love your story, because they got to hear my journey of my sales career. I really went into sales over the years. And he goes, would you come tell that story on my podcast? And I'm like, that sounds cool, but what the fuck's a podcast? And he explained to me that a podcast was like, news talk radio. I'm like, oh, that sounds like fun. Let's go do that. So the next week I showed up to his studio, which he had an actual in-person studio, and we did the show, and it was a blast. Had a great time. And after the show aired, one of his listeners reached out to me and ultimately became a client. And I went, wait, I can go on podcasts and listeners might reach out to me and they could potentially become clients? Hold my beer and watch this shit. So I started becoming just incensed with podcasting and getting on every show. And then it was in May of 2018 that I launched the Success Champions podcast. And I tell everybody, podcasting saved my business for a lot of reasons. It gave me processes, systems, and, it taught me how to hire teams and, hold them and myself accountable and just a lot of cool things. But it was, really May of 2018 where I finally started feeling like I was becoming a business owner. And then everything else we launched afterwards.
That's amazing that it was down to the stage. And I know people get to that point where they're going to bet everything on one circumstance. In that moment, and I know you said you looked at your wife and then you went out there and you gave all. Do you think you were serious? Like if you wouldn't have heard about this podcasting or anything, you think you would have been done?
No, that's a great question. And to be completely honest, no, I wouldn't have thrown in the towel, because the idea of going back to I mean, I think I was serious in telling my wife. I really think I was sincere in that. But would I've actually thrown in the towel? I don't think I would have. Um, because the idea of going and living by somebody else's rules, going back and having to report. I mean, Christ, I wear t-shirts and blue jeans everywhere, and you know the idea of potentially having to put on a suit jacket or a tie,
Mhm.
or not cussing because it's just more authentically me. Any of that stuff, I just get exhausted thinking about that stuff. So
No, yeah, I know how that goes. Yeah, yeah. So you're entrepreneurs. So you're at that moment. Now were you depressed? Because I always because there's business owners that are listening to this. We have a huge network of business owners, and I know there's got to be multiple that are sitting at that moment when you're like, hey, babe, I'm going and I'm over. I'll go do this, but then I'm done. And I think that's a huge transition, and I don't want people to throw in the towel because you said they were just beginning.
Yeah.
What caused you to? I know it was the podcasting and stuff like that. Was it just that there was something new, that there was a vision, there was you had a new path to go down?
That's a brilliant question, and I think it's a combination of a couple things. One, I had direction, right? Not necessarily a new direction, a direction. Because I think a lot of my business I was running without, hey, this is what we're actually creating. I think a lot of it I was guessing at what the business was going to be. I just didn't want to work for somebody else, and I think that there was this evolutionary moment happening, and I was also getting around other successful business owners. I would say I was getting around successful business owners at that point, and learning what they were doing. And it was throw in this combination of they were sharing their hard stories, of what it took for them to get their business off the ground. Because I don't know. I mean, I don't know how a lot of other people are, but oftentimes I'm guilty of seeing other people and going, "Oh my god, that success was almost handed to them."
Hmm.
And it's funny. I'm going to name drop, but there's a country singer named Cody Jinks. That's a really good friend of mine, and he's really just now starting to come into his own as a country singer, and he's starting to get lot more famous and whatnot. And I love it when people are like, "Oh, Cody Jinks is an overnight success." No, 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 fucker. 12 years ago, we were sitting on bar stools in a little tavern, him and just a guitar trying to figure out how to make all this work, and I think it was all of that coming together to back to the theme of you got to go through it to become it, that I started leveling up, evolving, and becoming a business owner by looking at things differently. And it's not the idea of this 10x thing that gets thrown around. It was the idea of how can I build what we're building, which at the time was a lot of consulting and coaching. How can I build this so I'm not the guy that does it? What does that look like?
Mm.
And that led me down the path, like editing the podcast, just to try and get more tactical. Editing the podcast, it sucks to edit your own podcast. If anybody's ever done it, it's a beating of a job. And I edited like the first 5 episodes of my show, and I'm like, dude, this sucks. But I also didn't have enough income coming in to try and pay somebody yet to edit the podcast. I'm like, shit, what do I do? And this guy happened to come to one of my speaking engagements, and he goes, "Man, I love your message, and I do video work and stuff." He goes, "Can we ever partner up on something?" And in the back of my head, I'm like, "Fuck, I'd love to, but I can't pay this guy." and I'm like, "Yeah, what does that look like?" He goes, "Well, I'd really like to just get some advice and coaching for you on my sales, because my sales suck." He goes, "And for trade, I can do something with your podcast." And I went, "What do you mean you can do something with my podcast?" He goes, "Well, do you need anybody to edit it or add stuff to it?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, absolutely, I do. He goes, well, why don't we do this? I'll edit your podcast. You coach me on sales. I'm like, done. And it was this whole light bulb moment for me of going, oh shit, people need what I have. I need what they have. Let's figure it out. And a lot of the first people I worked with, that was my first, people that I brought on, kind of from a VA virtual assistant, aspect, was all through trades and stuff. And of course, we've leveled up and scaled, and some of those people are still with me. We just pay them a hell of a lot more. But it is a combination of knowing where you want to go, being okay with going through the process, and then start stepping forward by creating systems that you can repeat on a regular basis. So think about trying to get guests on a podcast. Well, just having a show doesn't mean you're going to have guests. You got to think about, okay, what stories are your listeners going to want to listen to? What things do they want out of this? Then where are those people that can share and tell those stories? So I had to get on LinkedIn and Facebook and, start reaching out to people to have conversations. And I realized that all my sales years made it really easy for me to get guests on the show, because I would just use the same things I did in sales. And I had some amazing, awesome interviews. And, I've been lucky enough to interview some of the biggest names around the world. And that whole process went, okay, dude, you can't have a shit show. If you're, interviewing Shailene Johnson and some of these other amazing people, Mike Michalowicz, who's become a good friend, if you're going to interview all these people, then you got to get your shit together. So we started adding in all the services and processes and the packages, which led me to more teams and more people and automations and emails and operations. And it forced me to learn more things than I knew to do. A lot from an operational, a hell of a lot from a leadership standpoint. And it taught me to become a better version of me.
I love that. And I want to kind of like, because I'm getting close to the hour. I want to go into Success Champions Networking, what that is, how you define the business, and, kind of get more specific in that. And if it's there to help business owners, what Success Champions Network is.
Yeah, absolutely. So the business as a whole of Success Champions is really 4 businesses in one. So let me explain it really, really quick. We have Success Champions Magazine, which has its own revenue line. We're just hit our 1-year anniversary, and we got thousands of subscribers there. We have Success Champions Podcast, which has its own revenue line, and its own sponsors and everything associated with that. We have Success Champions, what we call Champions Table, mastermind groups and collaborations where we bring a bunch of small business owners together and help them grow and scale together. And then Success Champions Networking is what we created during COVID. And Success Champions Networking, we call it SCN for short, came about because COVID hit. And we knew that a lot of business owners at that point had no idea how to do business online, network online. So we knew we had to come up with an answer. Well, I'd grown a lot of my multi-million-dollar sales careers through some sort of networking, but I never truly liked what most people did at networking, because networking, what most people see it as is, you show up to a meeting. First you drive a half hour, 45 minutes across town. You show up to a meeting, you sit down, people go around the room, tell who the hell they are. Then somebody gets up, gives a 10-minute boring ass speech about the history of their freaking company. Then they talk about how many referrals they get, and then you leave. Right. And that's the whole networking experience. So I knew that sucked, and I didn't want to do that. So I'm like, okay, how can I combine everything we've done? Sales training, business training, marketing training, bringing real badasses together and create an environment where real fucking referrals happen. So we launched in May. And they're virtual meetings. They happen once a week. all across the U.S. We're in 4 countries now, and it is selective, one industry per industry. We don't let anybody in. No network marketing, no direct sales or whatever the fuck they call those things. They're primarily business to business focused because we just knew that the more business to business you bring together, the more high level the actual sales are, and the referrals are. And then it's very much built on this more mastermind than networking kind of function with some really, really, really cool structure. And then every Thursday, we have via Zoom and some other cool programs, I go live and teach, what companies paid me upwards of $250,000 a year to teach in sales and business development. And I bring in other phenomenal badasses to teach, networking and like accounting and finance, the things you really need to learn to become successful in your business. But instead of it just being your little group in your network, we're bringing in all the champions from around the world to do that training. So it is everything I wanted in networking without the bullshit. And, people are just flocking to it right now, and we're really excited to continue to build it.
Yeah, and what was the main cost for you to have? And I know you said you have 4 streams coming in, with the magazine, the podcast. How did you design that? That's brilliant.
We fell into it.
Isn't that funny? Falling into brilliance.
Yeah. I would love to say it was like some big fabricated plan, but from the podcast, we launched a Facebook group. And that became the catalyst for everything. And if you don't have a Facebook group for this podcast, I highly recommend it, because that becomes your where you find out everything what the marketplace wants. So literally the podcast got launched because the group was like, hey, we want to learn more from other business owners, and we just weren't capable of putting out enough content. So the team's like, let's do a digital magazine. All right, so we did a digital magazine. That worked. One thing we didn't talk about is I have the Badass Business Summit as well, and that came from the group. They're like, hey, we should do a massive get together with all the success champions, because that group's got almost 1,200 small business owners in there. And I'm like, okay, what does that look like? So we rented out the Hearst Convention Center, and then in September of 2020, in the mix of all the craziness, we sold out the Hearst Convention Center and brought people from all over the U.S. together to network and collaborate. And then the networking groups came because when COVID hit, we started hearing the business owners going, dude, how do we network? How do we do that? How do we continue to maintain business? And so we launched those to help them out. And then the masterminds and the consulting, that came from, hey, we're looking for ways that we can find ourselves around other business owners constantly talking about business. So it was a lot of listening to the market and what they were looking for and building specifically from there. So a tactical thing that everybody can do as a business owner is, where are your people hanging out?
Yeah.
Get there and start listening to the conversations and start figuring out how to solve those problems for them.
I love that. Yeah. And I just, being flexible like this, everybody always goes in on one thing. So, I mean, with the summit, you have 5 things that, that
they do.
you're doing. Yeah, and multiple. So, whenever you look at Success Champions Networking, or you're looking at your podcast or digital magazine, I mean, obviously you had to put systems in place. You have to be highly organized to make sure all 5 of these things are going in place. And I know you probably still work a lot, but what caused you, because I know business owners listening to this will be of a help to them. How did you go from not knowing being reflective and, should I do this, should I not, and I don't know if we're going to be in business, to now you have this it seems like an organized business with systems in place? What caused you to see the seriousness of that?
When I was putting in extremely long hour days and not seeing anything from it.
Yeah.
There was a lot of, I'm always a morning person. So I have a farm. So I've been up at 4 o'clock every morning for a long time. And then I go to bed around 10, 11 o'clock because there's a lot to take care of on the farm. And I always was pretty good in processes, but I was doing all this movement, but there was no tangible results other than I was just fucking tired. So I kept hearing people talk about, the business should function without you. Your staff should hold you more accountable than you're holding them. I just kept hearing all these crazy things. And a lot of it was from being on podcasts and just talking to people that were more successful than I was. And I realized that to be a business owner means you have systems, you have people, you have structure, you have things that aren't naturally ingrained with me. I'm not a rule follower. So I don't like the idea of following step 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Yes.
Right. But that step 1, 2, 3, and 4, other people need that to help you find the success you're looking for. So it was a lot of those, okay. And kind of the running joke in my company is, how do we break this down so big bird style that somebody who has never met my company could grab it and run? And we've continued, and it's not a perfect system, and we continue to evolve it, but it's based on this principle of, if I'm hit by a bus, somebody else can do it. And, I heard a wise guy tell me one time, he said, Donnie, look, if you're the only person that can do it in your company, then you created a job and not a business.
That's so true. Yes.
Right. So it's constantly figuring out new ways to get it off my plate, because ultimately my job is to do this, be out on podcasts, shake hands, do some high level networking, get into the right conversations, and get the brand and name out there so that more people can find our products and services and we can impact more businesses around the world.
I love that. And Donnie, I want to kind of get into, and this will be the last question. What, like when you're looking to the future of Success Champions Network, what are you looking at? And I know we're during COVID, but for 2021, 2022, what are you looking at Success Champion Network being, and what do you entail in the future?
So you're a podcaster. One of my favorite podcasts is Business Wars. And if you haven't listened to Business Wars, guys, I highly recommend it. And I'm not affiliated with them at all. This is just their damn good show. Well, Business Wars pitches two of the biggest companies in the world side by side. So think Pepsi and Coke, or, Apple and, HP or whatever, right? Big name, Nike and Adidas. And they go through like a 6-part series of how these businesses, competed and who won ultimately. Well, someday I will have Success Champions Networking versus BNI. And I don't think we're competition for BNI whatsoever. I need that organization because they teach all the rookies how to network, all the new people coming in. And I need them to teach people how to network. So when people grow beyond what they do, we can get them. They're now ready for us and for what we're doing. So we will have an absolute global empire of these virtual networkings and really continue to build things that are changing how the world networks by bringing real badasses together. And, we're always on the search for GSDs, what we call get shit done people. I mean, our website says you can't do epic shit surrounded by basic people. And so we're looking for GSDs, which are people that want to launch, these networking groups around the world, and to help us, continue to grow and, literally impact as many business owners as we possibly can. So we behind the scenes call it an empire, and, in the marketplace, it's slowly becoming that.
That's awesome. And how, if somebody wants to get a hold of you or wants to be a part of Success Champions Network, what's the best way that they can do that?
So 2 things. One, they can go to successchampionsnetworking.com. But 2, as a gift for all your listeners, one of the things people like Gary Vee and all these people out there always say is, you got to put content. Well, if you're running a small business and you're a solo, preneur type thing, it's a lot of work to put out a ton of content. So along the way, we figured out some cool ways to put a lot of content in a marketplace. And in one of our Thursday training for all of our networking groups, I taught a 45-minute session on how somebody can take 20 minutes and create a month's worth of social content using nothing but free programs. So we taught that. So if your listeners will text the words, "I am a success champion" to 817-318-6030, I'll send them that training for free. So "I am a success champion" to 817-318-6030.
So it's 817-318-6030.
Yep.
And they can receive that free training. That's awesome. I appreciate you doing that.
Absolutely.
Don. I want to just appreciate your vulnerability and being honest and opening up with your life story and sharing it, because I know there's so many business owners now that could relate with you and have experienced all the ups and downs that you have. And two, I just really appreciate what you're doing, not only with your podcast, but the way that you can be so flexible and maneuver. And, like COVID hits and then you're like, let's do this. And then you head in that direction, you create something out of nothing. And I think that's admirable. And I appreciate you taking the time to be on ABQ Business Podcast. It was awesome. Thanks, Don.
Absolutely, Jason. And guys, do me one quick favor. If you're listening to this podcast or any episodes that Jason puts on here, do him the greatest honor and tell one other person to listen to his show. As being a podcaster myself, I can tell you, the ratings, the reviews are all beautiful. But in this day and age, people are still figuring out how to listen to podcasts. So you can literally do him the greatest honor. It's almost like walking up and giving him a virtual hug by grabbing somebody else's phone and saying, "Dude, you've got to listen to this show," and then subscribe them right to his show. It'll mean everything to them. So Jason, thanks for having me on, brother. This is a hell of a conversation.
Yes, and real quick, your podcast, because I want to make sure I get that out there. How, if they grab their phone and type in your podcast,
Success Champion, wherever they listen to podcasts.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Donnie. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us on the Albuquerque Business Podcast. And thanks to our sponsor, RigbyDigital.com. Make sure to subscribe and share. And go to abqpodcast.com. Get show notes, resources, and links to everything we talked about today to help you navigate your journey as an entrepreneur and business owner.